Thanks, Helmut, for that very generous introduction. Oh my God. The two directors of the center are here. Christoph and Helmut, thank you so much. Thanks so much, everyone, for coming. And of course, thanks to the Rachel Carson Center for this opportunity, for having me this year. It's really an honor. I'll be talking a chapter actually from the book that I have to deliver on the 1st of June. I'm currently working on it still. It's based on my fieldwork in Thailand and elsewhere. This fieldwork in Thailand actually was very, very recent, in November of last year up to January of this year. This is part of a larger research project titled The Future of Energy in Developing Countries that I am leading at Boston University. The project gathers stories and cases of energy transitions as it happened, as it occurs, from about 15 developing countries using ethnography, interviews, focus groups, observations, those sort of qualitative methods. This project, as Helmut already alluded to, builds upon my research interest on rapid climate mitigation through accelerated sustainable energy transitions. And my very basic question for this research project is how things are actually being done in these spaces and ought to be done. It is in comparing these real world experiences of transitions with what that future ought to be that I am very interested in. So in this Thailand study, I visited about 3 rural sites in addition to visit in the capital Bangkok. Did focus groups, about 5 of those, did face-to-face interviews, about 60 of those, walkthroughs and participant observations. So Thailand is an interesting place to study. Among the 10 countries that make up the ASEAN sub-region, Association of Southeast Asian Nations, Thailand was able to increase its solar generation capacity in a matter of 5 years very, very rapidly, and it was extensive. It remains a fast-growing economy. It's always in the cusp of trades, politically especially. It's also one of the most highly unequal places on earth. It's not your kind of democracy. It is currently governed by a military government. However, it's interesting to note that despite this, some democratic processes are actually at work in some settings within the country, and I will try to demonstrate this in a few minutes. So the cultural landscape of the country as well is essential in the understanding of Thailand, and obviously the cultural underpinnings have direct relationship with the study of energy transitions in the country. There is a very strong culture of patronage in Thailand. Thai people are generally polite people. They give high regard to their elders. There is also an obvious high regard to the monarchy. So in every household, you will see this image of the monarch displayed in their living rooms and elsewhere. And I think you see this as well in Thai restaurants elsewhere in the world. The Ramanine, who reigned from 1950 to October last year, is highly respected still and was even considered a demigod in the country. For context, it is also key to mention here that Thailand has a very strict lèse majesté law, which basically is aimed to protect the king, the queen, the crown prince, and the regent. However, many observers suggest that the law is actually used beyond protecting the monarchy itself to actually suppress political dissent in the country. During my visit, the country was mourning the death of the king. This period of mourning will run for 1 year, so that began in October 2016, and it is still going on. The king is, as I already mentioned, highly regarded in Thailand and elsewhere by many Thai people. He instituted a development program across Thailand that advocate for a self-sufficiency philosophy or self-sufficiency economy. So this particular philosophy emphasizes on moderation, on responsible consumption, and resilience to external shocks. It places high regard to the natural environment and the social development of the Thai people. The monarchy's royal development projects are, you can see that almost everywhere in Thailand, especially in the rural areas. And there's part of the literature that says that this particular development project is built on the self-sufficiency economy philosophy, is actually was able to help in the opium production in the northern part of the country, in the border with Myanmar and Laos, that part called Golden Triangle. However, just as the less just law is criticized, so is this particular philosophy as well. Some scholars even suggest that this self-sufficiency economy philosophy is actually being used by the Thai government to basically perpetuate poverty, especially in rural Thailand. Of the 4 sites I have visited for this study, I'll be focusing my gaze today on a community about 250 kilometers southwest of the capital, where there are about 200 plus households living sporadically. It is located in a national park in the border with Myanmar. The national park is called Keng Krachon. There are indigenous people living in the area as well as migrants from other parts of the country. As mentioned earlier, the people there live sporadically. So your nearest neighbor, for instance, is located about 2 to 3 kilometers away from your house or your farm. So many of them are farmers. They plant a variety of crops: maize, rice, vegetables, lime, jackfruit, and raising cattle and poultry. Some have day jobs located about 60 kilometers east of the community in bigger towns, mostly in a township called Cham, where some of the white sand beaches in the country is located. Some work in a nearby royal development project that is focused on cattle raising and poultry and dairy farming. Some work in the private sector. They grow pineapples for this American agricultural company called Dole, which has substantial presence in the area as well. So some of the crops are planted in the area are pineapple and bananas. So the nearest public market is about 30 kilometers east of the community, where you can also find a temple, the hospitals, the government center, basically. So in Thailand, the government claims to have already achieved that 100% electrification rate, except for those living in protected areas, such as this community that I have visited. The principal interest was actually to document that particular transition, whether there is a change in these settings where the grid is not allowed to get clean. Focusing on how these households, these people living there are moving vertically in the so-called energy ladder, that is from using traditional forms of fuels to modern forms of energy. Beyond that, however, beyond the technical change, I'm also interested in gathering stories and narratives of social change that come along those technical changes, particularly the impacts of those socio-technical energy transition to people's lives and their livelihoods, those sort of things. And just like in many Thai rural villages, this particular community also values the King's self-sufficiency economic philosophy really highly. This means that while the center of my attention is geared towards that socio-technical change in energy hardware, energy use, energy generation, etc., one cannot simply ignore the fact that there are inherent complexities in those transitions, and that entails the need to understand the community as a whole, their means of livelihoods, their traditions, their culture, their organization, their communal interactions, as well as the interactions beyond their communities. I do not lay claim to have comprehensively achieved that, but I try to employ multiple methods to at least deepen my understanding of this socio-technical transition as it happened in the ground. I have triangulated my key interview with data from interviews from outside the community and elsewhere. I look at published news articles, for example, as well. However, my methods, I concede, have acute limitations. I do not speak and read Thai, although I have lived in Thailand for 2 years working for the UN. I just don't have that capacity to speak Thai. My methods, however, so those methods nonetheless have provided me a view from the outside, which may have rendered my observations quite limited. But still, I feel the story of this real-world innovation, as it happened in rural Thailand, needs to be told and appreciated for its possible contributions to our understanding of energy transitions, especially in developing countries. So transitions are about shift. It's about change. It's about movement from a particular state to another. In appreciating this particular transition, it is key to understand how this particular community lived 10 or 20 years ago, then compare that to how they live their lives today. And one of my interview questions actually basically ask that question. So what was life back then? What was the principal use? What were the principal fuels used for just meeting basic needs, lighting and cooking, more particularly? So I get a single common response when asking that question. For cooking, mainly illegally harvested fuel woods in the nearby forest. For lighting, they usually use kerosene lamps, which is to me is very familiar since I have lived my childhood years in communities similarly look like this community in Thailand. At present, many households have already transitioned away from that fuels. So a portfolio of mainly renewable energy systems is present. You can see, for example, this lighting system being powered by a solar home system, at least to provide power for a radio or television set. You can also see water pumps used for irrigation. You can see an innovation in biogas digester system, for example, to provide fuel for cooking. However, while solar-based systems for lighting or for irrigation tend to be common elsewhere in the world, this particular biogas digester caught my eye because this is the first system, one of the most innovative system in terms of getting fuel from manure that I saw. So what they did was actually to tweak the traditional concrete biogas system, which you can see to your right, that they observed elsewhere, and then instead of using relatively expensive materials, they use cheaper plastic material to develop what can be called a floating dome biogas digester. So this particular system is faster to build, it requires less labor, it's cheaper, and most especially it's able to displace firewood and even LPG, liquefied petroleum gas cylinders completely. So it's fueled by fermenting cow manure, which is locally abundant and obviously sustainable and renewable. It does not only provide cooking fuel, however. Some households here even use it for generating a tiny bit of power using a small engine for electricity generation. The technologies, however, are but one part of the transition narrative. As mentioned earlier, I am more interested to look at the social innovation, if any, that goes along this particular technical innovation. This means delving deeper to understand how the technologies are actually deployed, how they are sustained, what the tensions are during these deployments, who the key internal and external actors are, and how these actors interact. So in asking these questions, I try to respond to one bigger question, that is how to possibly we, in developing countries, can facilitate our own energy transition. This is, I think, most important, is to how to bring that to scale, such that by 2050, we will be able to see that the biggest chunk of our energy generation portfolio is provided by renewables. One can say that the observed innovation at microscale does not necessarily contribute to that normative aspiration, or in developing countries about ensuring energy security, which to the context of developing countries does not necessarily mean the security of supply. It also means reliable supply, affordable supply, legal supply, and of course a sustainable supply. So the hypothesis that I'm trying to check in this particular part of the project is whether or not such bottom or micro level transitions, if you will, can be actually deployed at scale, whether they can be replicated, whether they can travel elsewhere and multiply. That way we too in the global south can meet our own climate pledges and contribute to sustainable development in time. There is reason for optimism, I believe. The bottom-up approach to make a dent to address seemingly impossible challenges, including global ones, has been proven to work. The Paris Agreement, which comprises contributions nationally determined, is one example, despite, of course, its obvious flaws of not really being in line with the 2 degrees ambition. What we aspire here is that for this small-scale, bottom-level approaches to, again, to travel and multiply, so that they together can make substantial contribution to rapid transition. So in one conceptualization, that process can be called the blossoming of 1,000 flowers. And such blossoming appears to be evident in this community that I visited in Thailand, rural Thailand. So some forms of social successes can already be achieved in this community. Many of my respondents said that they no longer, that the transition actually benefited them, and but in terms of improvements in the quality of their lives, most of the benefits actually were reported by women. This is taken during one of my focus groups methodology in the field. They do not need to harvest fuel wood, for example, illegally from the forest. They do not need to spend on LPG cylinders. But perhaps most interestingly, most of my respondents, majority of them, almost universally agreed that the most important benefit that they get from this is that they're able to establish closer relationships with their neighbors despite the literal distance. I will show that in a while. So is this particular innovation in rural Thailand a socio-technical innovation in practice? That's a question. Partially, I have provided an evidence that the technological innovation has occurred, but how about the social aspect of innovation? What makes it an innovation with a social dimension in the first place? And if it is a social innovation, technological innovation, what could it be? So it is key to note here that there is no really formal sort of institutional arrangement or a governing body that defines some form of governance in this community. Of course, there exists a formal local government unit, which is a little bit far from this particular village. But there is a community exercise, as it appears, that is purely generated by the people themselves. I will show that particular exercise in a while. And this aptly reminds me of the polycentric governance approaches that Elinor Ostrom has observed elsewhere. So some sort of backstory I think it's very important to mention here. So about 10 years ago, there was a man named Kun Kusun who migrated to the area, to this community, to do some farming while at the same time continuing his work as a forest ranger, which is a government post. Kun Kusun can be considered what the literature and transitions is calling as innovation system builder, an intermediary, a cosmopolitan actor, or a technology advocate. In short, this man plays the key role in building a functioning innovation system we are witnessing in this community. So when Kun Kusun moved into Padeng, that's the name of the community, by the way, his neighbors, following Thai tradition and Thai customs, visited him one late afternoon, bringing with them some locally brewed wine. In one of these visits, which eventually became regular events, Kun Kusun persuaded his neighbors to organize themselves into a self-sufficiency group in line with the king's self-sufficiency economy. So they liked the idea and started discussing about how they could actually achieve it without much external support. So when he spoke with Kun Kusun during one of my visit in the area, he highlighted that particular philosophy, the king's self-sufficiency economy, is the key trigger for why they are doing what they are doing. So their approach comprises of 4 key themes, not just sustainable energy. So they have capacity development, skills building, livelihood strategies, those kind of things. The local environment, looking after its others, community welfare, and of course there's a portfolio of modern energy services that I have shown you earlier. So while it is essential to note here that this particular innovation, if we accept that it's an innovation, was germinated from within, it does not operate in a vacuum. Rather, it continues to actually benefit from many external collaboration that this community affords. For example, they have collaboration with the Thailand Ministry of Energy, where they learn about emerging energy technologies, etc. They have a collaboration with some private firms, one of which provided them batteries that they can recycle for their solar home systems. And they have also collaboration with other self-sufficiency groups around Thailand. So perhaps the most important aspect of this socio-technical innovation, now let's go to the social innovation aspect of the innovation itself, is one that I had the opportunity to observe one Sunday morning. So during this community visit in November last year, I think I was fortunate to have arrived in time for this regular monthly meeting. I didn't know it beforehand. That this community does out of their own volition. So during this particular assembly or event, members of the community are gathered together And most of the participants are actually women, with children also present. And this regular meetups occur at a new place each month. So they move the venue, and every month they come together, bring food, gossip, and of course deliberate. For a while, I have been reading materials about deliberation, about deliberative democracy, which are exercises, particularly about the role of these exercises in shaping policy. One of my working papers investigate actually the promise of that deliberative systems, the deliberative exercise as a system in facilitating accelerated transition. Asking questions such as, will it be possible to accelerate the transition without centralizing control, and in effect without suppressing democracy, instead reinforcing it? And when I saw this particular exercise panning out before my eyes, I got very excited. I thought what I was absorbing that Sunday morning was actually a deliberative exercise in action, but was it? So there's only one way to check whether this is actually a deliberative democracy exercise in action, and that is to compare it against what the literature says. So deliberative democracy exercise occur as long as they explicitly recognizes the multiplicity of values and the potential for creative but also troublesome conflict among its participants, and as long as they seek inclusive, respectful, and rational dialogues, and are in effect transforming these sites into sites of inherent and reflexive exchanges of arguments between reasonable citizens guided by the principle of impartiality. That's a long theory, I guess. And for an exercise to fall in the ambit of deliberative democracy, according to John Dryzek, who is one of the prominent deliberative scholars out there, it has to be authentic, it has to be inclusive, and it has to be consequential. Authenticity means that the participants are able to exchange reasons under conditions of equality and fairness. Inclusivity means that participants receive ample opportunity to learn, reflect, and engage in the plurality of the options before them. Consequentiality means that the outcomes of the exercise are actually reflected in the actual decisions made. So let's go back again to this particular event and then check whether this is a deliberative democracy exercise. So the meeting revolves around discussing around those three key themes that the community wants to focus on. So the capacity development, building skills, new jobs, opportunities, the local environment, the protection of the national park, welfare, taking care of each other, and sustainable energy, deploying those portfolio of renewable energy systems. So usually the meeting starts with 4 people reporting about those 4 key themes, and then the discussions begin with the facilitator assuring everyone present of respect and openness. And despite that, I have observed conflicts during this particular meeting, but they were evidently welcomed and were tried to be resolved during the event. Actually, they make it a point that they have to settle all these conflicts during the day. They have to leave the place without any conflicts. So I think these are authentic exchanges that ensured the participants and their guaranteed conditions of equality and fairness by welcoming various competing arguments and alternatives, and promise to address whatever that issue at hand that makes it an authentic deliberation. This particular exercise also seeks inclusivity by providing its participants with ample opportunity to learn, to reflect, and to engage with the many options presented before them. As these processes occur, and I've observed that consensus is often achieved, but not at all times, which is, I think, okay in terms of the deliberative approach. The meeting were able to induce controversy, actually, contestations, and many times compromise when people engage with those questions. All decisions made during this event are actually being revisited in the next monthly meeting or monthly event to ensure that the outcomes are consequential, meaning they are reflected in actual practice. So one of the key agenda of this meeting was about people sharing their experiences and how they develop the technologies, improve them, the challenges and difficulties they encountered, and how they were able to address them and what the results were. So there's a process of learning in there. So I think this particular exercise passes all the three criteria that John Dryzek has argued for. And it is evident that the participants have acquired what deliberative democracy scholars call as deliberative capacity. But the question again lingers: can this be used actually as an exemplar for others in Thailand to emulate, or others elsewhere? Can this be replicated? Can this travel? Can this be scaled? Can this be multiplied? If so, how? So to answer that, I turn to the evolving understanding of deliberative democracy itself, its systemic turn. So the idea of deliberative systems opens up a new perspective by which deliberative democracy can be thought of as a system, not just a distributed, site-specific kind of innovation as what we have observed in this community. So in this particular idiom or particular concept, deliberative democracy is not necessarily thought as a single in terms of single settings or innovations or demonstrations, rather as a whole, involving pockets of deliberative sites that work together to produce deliberative outcomes. For a system to be considered deliberative, however, this deliberative exercise that we observe in this community needs to be linked to a wider deliberative system. So to do that, deliberative democracy scholars argue that you need to build, extend, and enrich what they call virtues of deliberation using three linked approaches. So you have to do deliberation making, legitimacy enhancing, and capacity building. So I'm not able to observe it yet empirically, but the literature suggests how this can be normatively done. So in terms of deliberation making, the energy transition technologies that we observe in this community needs to transfer to other communities, as well as the social innovation. The hardware is already traveling. However, the social innovation, this kind of exercises, for example, are not yet, at least based on my empirical observation. And until we see that both the social and the technical innovation that this community produced is practically and successfully replicated elsewhere, you would not be able to say that deliberation making is systematically achieved. How about enhancing legitimacy? Based on data, this is already beginning to occur. So as this people in the community actually acquire those new skills through internal knowledge transfers. Remember, during those meetings, they reflect upon how they improve the technologies, what the lessons they learned from those. So internal legitimacy is already achieved. We can argue for that. However, for the deliberative process to be effectively linked with that system, this particular innovation needs to be externally legitimized. So there has to be legitimation outside the community, and this could only occur when the larger type polity. When the larger type polity is convinced that what is happening in this community are actually worth pursuing. And however, these validations are already occurring, as I have mentioned earlier. So the community has been able to receive a number of key recognitions, including from Thailand's Ministry of Energy, for example, which I think an evidence of their earned external legitimacy. But that's only one part of it. The third component of making it part of the deliberative system is capacity building. And this requires people in the community itself becoming exemplars of this innovation, of this, not only of the hardware innovation, but also the social innovation. What this means is that these very people in the community should be able to provide and exhibit, again, to the larger Thai polity, their gained confidence to facilitate energy transition amongst themselves, and to transmit the knowledge that they learned and skills from their deliberative practices to other communities. So this process of socio-technical transfers are, without question, subject to a number of contestations. So there are a lot of tensions going on here. And a question that plays out of my mind is that, will this particular community, rural innovation, be able to travel successfully? Something that we can only hope for at this stage. In many ways, this particular innovation could be considered a democratic exercise at its finest, arguably. What makes it more special, however, is that it is able to thrive in a non-democracy. Remember, Thailand is a non-democratic country. But perhaps what us in the Western world understand as democracy is just different from what Eastern communities, such as this in Padang, have been deliberately living for years. We can glean many things from this gaze on a single case. It shows, for instance, that citizens in communities in developing countries can be inspired, we can be engaged, and we can be interested in a public issue. That change can occur when basically people engage with one another. That collective action brings the best in individuals. We show that panning out in this community. It also shows that this particular social approach, the deliberative exercises that we empirically observe, could possibly represent a somehow stable framework around which engaged citizens could be effectively organized and mobilized. And while maybe this particular exercise to some or to many Western observers is contemporary, is new, this particular exercise tends to be actually commonplace in many communities, and not only in Thailand. I've observed that also in my country, in the Philippines. And it's been occurring around these spaces since time immemorial, with neighbors, for instance, gathering together, helping each other in rice planting and rice harvesting, for example. Nevertheless, this particular arrangement, this communal micro-level socio-technical innovation, is not a panacea for what we need to meet rapid transition and to address what ails contemporary democracy. Still, many of the disadvantaged groups in these areas, in these societies, are likely to be at least as ineffective in getting what they want in this kind of institutional arrangement as they are in more conventional forms of political action. There are others. That said, this particular case can actually be considered, a good example of a good innovation for energy transition from below. It's still early, however, again, to say that the large-scale transmission of this particular innovation will be possible. We can only hope for that. This thoroughgoing innovation may indeed be, or could be, a rare example of an ideal innovation practice for transition, if not sui generis. Nonetheless, again, it provides us citizens from relatively poor communities that we are also capable of behaving deliberatively, that we are also capable of doing our transitions, engaging with options and alternatives with an open mind and with respect to what others can offer, and accomplish energy transition without much external support. Obviously, the techniques that we have observed in Padang, are not too extraordinary. A number of similar approaches can be seen elsewhere, obviously. But one thing can be absolute: this innovation can never be enough on its own. We remain in need of diverse collectives of public engagement, especially as they exist in situ, making them effective in generating what we can call a collective social intelligence for the necessary system change to meet the goal of accelerating the transition, meeting that 2 degrees Celsius target, and obviously for sustainable development in these spaces. Thank you very much.